Eyes beyond the window. Windows are supposed to separate inside from outside, to keep the world at bay. Glass, thin as it is, feels like a boundary, transparent yet final. I used to believe that nothing could cross it except light. But that belief withered in the house where night pressed so heavily against the panes that it seemed to breathe. I learned that sometimes what watches from the darkness is not held back by glass, and sometimes it is not the house you should fear, but what waits patiently outside of it. The windows upstairs were narrow, framed with peeling white paint that had grayed with age. Their latches were rusted, their panes clouded by dust and streaks of time. When daylight spilled through them, the beams were thick with dust motes, drifting lazily as though time itself was slowed. But once the sun dipped below the horizon, those same windows became black mirrors. They reflected nothing of the outside world, only the faint shimmer of the house's interior and the person standing before them. It began on the second week of my stay. The house had already turned restless around me. Creaks where none should be, cold air rising like invisible smoke, the faint sour smell of damp brought hiding in corners I had not yet uncovered. I was lying awake in one of the upstairs rooms, staring into the dark, when I first noticed it. A glint. That was all. A faint sparkle, like a shard of glass catching moonlight. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of my own flashlight beam against the pane, but the light had long since died, its batteries drained and abandoned beside me. Yet the glint remained, twin sparks in the void beyond the glass. I rose and approached, my breath shallow, each step weighted with hesitation. The floorboards gave soft sighs beneath me. When I reached the window, I stopped short. The glass was cold under my palm, so cold that condensation spread from my touch, blurring the view. But beyond that hazy surface, the twin lights glowed faintly red. Not bright, not sharp, but steady. They hovered at a height that matched my own, suspended in the dark as though something stood just beyond the reach of the faint moon. I told myself they were animal eyes. A stray dog, a raccoon, something ordinary, something natural. Yet the longer I stared, the more I knew I was lying to myself. No animal holds its gaze so still, so unblinking for so long. I backed away, forcing myself to return to my blanket on the floor. I closed my eyes, but sleep never came. Even with lids shut tight, I saw them. Two glowing points burning through the dark, patient, unrelenting. The following nights repeated the pattern. As soon as I tried to rest, they appeared. Always at the same window, always at the same height, sometimes closer, pressing nearer to the glass, until the faint suggestion of a shape emerged in the glow. A curve, a ridge, not quite a face, but something standing where no one should stand. The air near the window changed as well. It grew damp, humid, as though breath fogged the glass from the outside. When I leaned close, the pane shivered faintly beneath my touch, trembling as though responding to a force pressing from the other side. And through that trembling came a sound, so faint I nearly dismissed it as imagination. A low hum, more felt than heard, vibrating through the glass into my fingertips. By the fourth night, I had moved my makeshift bed away from the window. Yet the distance offered no protection. The eyes appeared regardless, their glow cutting through the dark, pulling my gaze even when I tried to resist. They no longer seemed content to remain still. They shifted, gliding from one window to the next, sliding past corners, following me. Wherever I went in the house, sooner or later, I found them waiting. Once, I dared to open the window. I don't know what I expected, an empty yard perhaps, or the sudden rush of night air clearing away the illusion. But when I slid the warped frame upward, the smell hit me first. Damp earth, mold, the rank sweetness of something decayed. The night air was heavy, wet, clinging to my lungs as I leaned out. The yard stretched empty, moonlight pale across the grass. Yet the eyes remained unmoving, still fixed at the same height, no matter how far I leaned or craned my neck. It was as though they were not truly outside at all, but pressed into the glass itself, impossibly close, yet forever unreachable. I slammed the window shut. The pane rattled, but the eyes did not flicker. They only burned brighter, patient and cruel. The night stretched longer, slower. My sense of time dissolved. I no longer knew if I had slept or only drifted into waking dreams. Sometimes I would blink, and the eyes would be gone, leaving the glass empty and black. Relief would flood me, only to collapse into dread when I blinked again and found them closer, so close that their faint glow spread across the glass in hazy halos, like fireflies crushed against the surface. One night, I made the mistake of touching the pane again. The surface was slick this time, damp with condensation, but not from inside. My fingertip met liquid cold as ice, sliding downward in rivulets that streaked the glass. When I drew my hand back, the moisture clung to me, sticky, thicker than water. I raised it to my nose and nearly gagged. The stench was metallic, rank, and sweet, the same sick odor that lingered in the deeper parts of the house. The eyes pulsed then, as though reacting to my touch. Their glow swelled and dimmed in slow rhythm, like breathing. For the first time, I knew with certainty they were alive, not reflections, not tricks of the light. Something stood beyond the glass, patient, waiting, watching me with the hunger of a predator hidden in the brush. I avoided the windows after that. I barricaded them with sheets, with furniture, with anything I could find. But the fabric only dulled the glow. It seeped through anyway, faint red halos bleeding into the room. Even with my back turned, I could feel them burning against me, drilling into the back of my skull with their unending stare. And then came the sound. Not the hum this time, not the vibration in the glass. A different sound entirely. Scratching. Faint at first, delicate as fingertips dragged lightly across the pane. Then louder, sharper, nails biting into the glass, scoring invisible marks that made my teeth ache. The rhythm was deliberate, slow, a message written in a language I could not understand. I pressed my hands against my ears, curled into myself, but the sound reached deeper than hearing. It wormed its way into my bones, resonating through my ribs until I thought they might crack. The scratching did not stop until dawn, when the first pale light of morning bled into the room. For a few hours, the house would feel normal again. The windows reflected only the yard, the empty street, the pale sky. But as the sun sank, the eyes returned, always in pairs, always fixed. Sometimes one set, sometimes two scattered across different windows, but never blinking, never gone for long. On the last night I endured in that place, I made the mistake of looking too closely. I had been lying awake, paralyzed by exhaustion and fear, when the glow brightened suddenly, swelling until the room itself glowed faintly red. I rose against my better judgment, drawn to the nearest window as though pulled by invisible strings. The eyes filled the pane, pressed flush against the glass. They were larger than I realized, each one the size of my palm, their surface wet and glistening. pupils dilated, contracting, expanding again in rhythm, studying me. The glow within them swirled faintly, twisting as though lit from deep inside by some internal flame. And then the glass bulged inward, only slightly, but enough that the pane shivered in its frame, enough that I stumbled back, terror clawing through my chest. The eyes pressed harder, the glass trembling under the strain, fogging with condensation from the outside. A low groan reverberated through the walls, a sound of pressure, of hunger pushing against a barrier too thin to last forever. I fled the house before the pane could break. I do not remember grabbing my bag, do not remember running down the stairs, only the crash of the front door behind me and the gasp of cold night air filling my lungs as I staggered into the street. When I dared to glance back, every window glowed faintly red, dozens of eyes staring from the dark, waiting for me to return. I never went back. But sometimes, in my own home, far from that place, I wake in the night to a faint shimmer on the glass. Twin sparks glowing just beyond the pane. I tell myself it's headlights, reflections, tricks of the street lamps. Yet I know better. I know they've followed me, patient as ever, waiting for the night I am too tired, too weak to resist. Windows are not barriers. Not anymore. Hour of 3:15. There is a certain time of night when the world feels thinner, when silence presses heavier than sound and the air itself tastes stale, as though everything around you has been exhaled and never drawn back in. For me, that hour was always the same. 3:15. The numbers burned themselves into my memory, carved deep into my nerves, because each night, without fail, I would wake to see them glowing faintly on the clock by my bed. I never set an alarm. I never chose that time. My body simply tore me from sleep, eyes snapping open as though someone had whispered my name from the corner of the room. The red digits of the clock glared in the darkness. 3:15. Always 3:15. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Some quirk of my body, some restless rhythm. But the more nights that passed, the less it felt random. Each waking was accompanied by a sensation I cannot fully describe. A heaviness, like the air itself was pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The silence was not natural silence. It was heavy, taut, expectant, as though the house itself was waiting. I would lie still, staring into the dark, listening. The old house had always been restless, creaks of wood contracting in the cold, faint groans of its bones shifting under its own weight. But after 3:15, the sounds grew deliberate. They did not scatter randomly. They gathered, coiled, moved with intention. One night, I felt it most acutely. My eyes opened, red digits glaring 3:15. The air was cold, colder than it had any right to be with the furnace still running below. My breath fogged faintly in front of me, a ghost of itself in the dim light. The silence was so thick I could hear my heartbeat, a slow, pounding drum that seemed too loud for the room. And then beneath it, faint but clear, came the sound. A door hinge. Not mine. Not anywhere near me. Somewhere in the house, far above, a door creaked open on its own. The sound carried down the staircase, slow, reluctant, stretching far longer than it should. The silence that followed was worse, because it wasn't empty. It was charged, alive, vibrating with something unseen. I lay rigid, my ears straining. Then came the next sound, a floorboard groaning beneath weight. Another, the steady rhythm of something walking, each step deliberate, pausing between as though savoring the descent. The clock beside me shifted its digits. 3:16, and then the steps stopped. I tried to rationalize. Dreams bleed into waking life. Old houses make old sounds. But my skin knew better. Goose flesh prickled along my arms, my scalp tightened, and I could not shake the feeling that something had moved through the house, closer, only to stop just beyond the edge of perception. The pattern repeated, night after night. Always at 3:15, my body wrenched awake, lungs tight, heart hammering. Always the sounds, the creak of doors, the weight on the floorboards, the slow approach. Sometimes the steps circled rooms I was not in. Sometimes they stopped halfway down the stairs. And sometimes, the worst times, they paused just outside my door, silence stretching long and thin, as if something stood there waiting for me to acknowledge it. I never did. I kept my eyes fixed on the glowing numbers, praying for them to change, praying for the hour to pass. But the house did not let me go so easily. One night, I woke not to sound but to absence. The red digits burned, 3:15. Yet the air was different, heavier, charged with a weight that pressed into my chest. I turned my head, slow, reluctant, and saw the clock's glow reflected faintly on the wall. My own shadow sprawled beside it, but there was more than one. The second shadow leaned longer, thinner, stretching upward from nowhere. It should not have been possible. There was nothing to cast it. No furniture, no figure. Yet it was there, motionless, as though pinned against the wall. I could not move. My body locked in place, every muscle frozen with terror. I stared at the clock, watching the digits blink. 3:15. The shadow twitched just barely, and the temperature in the room dropped further. I could see the fog of my breath drifting toward the ceiling. The silence hummed, vibrating in my ears, until it was broken by the faintest sound. A whisper, not of words but of air itself moving where it should not. The digits blinked again. 3:16, the shadow was gone. I told myself I had imagined it. I told myself it was nothing more than exhaustion, sleeplessness playing tricks on me. But deep down I knew better. The nights blurred after that. I stopped trying to sleep, too afraid of waking at that hour. Yet even when I stayed awake, the same thing happened. My eyes would wander, heavy with fatigue, and when I blinked them open again, the clock glowed 3:15. It was as if the house conspired to draw me into that moment, no matter how I fought it. The sounds grew bolder, scraping along the walls, taps on the glass of the windows, a slow dragging sound, as though something heavy was being pulled across the floor above me. I sat with my back pressed against the wall, flashlight clutched in trembling hands, but the beam never revealed anything. The light felt weak, swallowed by the dark, as though the hour itself refused illumination. On the last night, the house revealed more. My eyes snapped open. 3:15. The digits glowed brighter than ever, harsh against the dark, searing into my mind. The air was so cold that frost edged the inside of the window panes, delicate veins spreading across the glass. My breath clouded thick before me, and then I heard it. Not footsteps, not doors, a heartbeat. At first, I thought it was my own pounding in my chest, but no, it was too slow, too heavy, echoing through the floor beneath me. The sound rose from the earth itself, each thud shaking the boards, rattling the clock on the table. It was the heartbeat of the house. The digits flickered. 3:15 froze, refusing to change. I watched in horror as the colon between the numbers blinked on and off, while the minutes refused to pass. Time itself had stalled, trapping me in that moment. The heartbeat grew louder, heavier, until I felt it in my teeth, my skull, my bones. My vision blurred, my stomach churned, and still the digits glowed, the colon blinking endlessly. And then, with a sound like wood splintering, the door to my room shuddered. It didn't open. It didn't need to. The cold flooded in anyway, pressing against me, suffocating me. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into pure darkness, save for the red digits burning against the black. 3:15. Something moved in the room with me. I could not see it, but I felt the air shift, felt the weight of eyes on me from every angle. The heartbeat of the house thundered, joined now by a whispering chorus, dozens of voices overlapping, their words indistinguishable, but their intent clear. They had been waiting for me, waiting for this hour to claim me. The digits blinked. Off, on, off, on, never changing. I don't remember how I escaped. My memory fractures at that point, splitting into jagged shards of terror. The next thing I recall is daylight pouring through the windows, the clock dark, dead, its batteries drained though they had been new only the night before. But even now, long after leaving that house, I cannot sleep easily. I wake at night, cold sweat soaking me, eyes snapping to the clock at my bedside. I see the digits glow. Sometimes it's 2:59, sometimes 4:22. But sometimes, too often, it is 3:15. And when it is, I lie frozen, afraid to blink, afraid to breathe, knowing that somewhere in the silence, something is waiting for me again.